Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. So something a little different for today. A list. Everybody loves lists, maybe book people especially. Today is 6 ways you're destroying your reading habit. This is more for people who are new to this and are trying to progress and stay consistent in their reading habit. So please watch the video all the way to the end because the last one is the most important, for me at least. I think we all want to improve our reading habits. We all want to read more. We all want to comprehend as much as we possibly can in the shortest amount of time possible. There are ways to improve this, and they're not always obvious. And there are a lot more than 6, so if this goes over well, I may make more in the future. I thought this might save you some time. Maybe a lot of your time, which is much more valuable than money. Especially if you've got a full-time job or kids and your job has nothing to do with literature or you have no time to read. But you love reading or there are some very large or very challenging books that you want to read. I've already made these mistakes for years, so if you're serious about reading and finishing books, perhaps you won't have to. That's my hope at least. All right, onward. Number 6, pretty obvious. Not making the time for reading. Take a look at your library. If you have 3 IKEA shelves filled with classics or minor classics or even just a variety of fiction, 3 of them, poetry and various things you plan on reading, and your career does not require you or really allow you to read books. Trust me, coming from a guy who does this for a living. 3 shelves, remember, this is more than 3. It is entirely possible that you will not read all the books on those 3 shelves before you die. It's totally possible. Even if you love reading, if you're a programmer, if you're a lawyer, if you're a firefighter, if you're a cop, if you're a nuclear physicist, if you have a family, if you have kids, if you've got things to do. One life, trust me, does not allow for many books. It really doesn't. And even if you read them, right, like your eyes have glossed the pages, you certainly will not get everything out of them that there is to get, and probably not even the majority. That is, unless you schedule and intentionally make time for reading, and you really track it to some degree. 1 hour a day is excellent. Whatever you can, whether it's 5 minutes or an hour, just every day. 15 minutes, an hour a day, great. Totally fine. Whatever you can, just as long as you do it every single day. I know, not spontaneous, not flanneurily musing over some pages and gaining electrifying insight, not blasting through Kant's Critique of Pure Reason like it's nothing, like in that movie with Matt Damon where he's a genius and Robin Williams is talking about his wife's flatulence. No, it's far more arduous than that. It's work, right? It's time, a lot of it. Running over the same lines when they're not hitting you and searching through written material about it or stopping, coming back and reading it over and over again until you get it. It's very expensive, actually. As far as opportunity costs, it's very, very expensive. But I mean, if it interests you, then, yeah, hell yeah, come on board. And don't be upset if you're not getting it immediately, if it's not revealing itself to you quickly. Because often with the difficult texts, the big ones, the classics or the notoriously impenetrable, they take time. There's multiple interpretations. There's tons of commentary. It's really, there's the text and then there's everything supporting the text. It's not for the impatient and it demands time. So you got to make it. Preferably every day. But, I mean, if you love books, if you love reading, this shouldn't be an issue. But for those of you who are new, just know that this is, it's an investment of time. And you're not going to get Ulysses the first time round, if you're going to invest the time, you don't want to just skim it, right? Not taking time to study and comprehend the words on the page, right? To analyze them and to gain insight into the author's intention and so on. And how it relates to things that have come before it, how it's inspired things that have come after. And this isn't to say that you need to comprehend everything about every single book, but your experience will be more or less rich depending on how much you've gotten from it. Number 5, you want to have read, not to read. Guilty of this one, undoubtedly. This is like the wants to be a writer versus wanting to write thing William Gaddis has discussed. It's not always going to be riveting, right? It's a long game with a lot of novels. I think one has to enjoy working through it and extracting the information, interpreting and deciphering. I think after a few big novels, you figure out whether or not it's for you. And then you want to read. Does it give you that satisfaction, that profound satisfaction at the end, even if you didn't get all of it? Those books are really exciting because then you know that there's going to be more upon second read. Really one of the many reasons why reading fewer books of higher quality may be preferable, but we'll return to that. But the act of doing so must be in some way desirable or pleasurable, intellectually, in and of itself. And if it's not, perhaps you should question why on earth you're spending your time doing this one thing. Your very finite time doing this one thing that you don't enjoy and get no satisfaction from. Possibly to look cool for other people? Don't. Life's too short. Learn how to lift weights. It's not for everybody. And just because it is for you doesn't make you better. In fact, the more in love with literature you are of the artistic variety, the far more difficult it will be for you to make money. Statistically proven. I'm just joking, but I wouldn't be surprised if that were proven one day. You hear so much about what the best books are by the so-called experts, and you just gotta have read Joyce and Dostoevsky and Proust and so on. Is there something to this? Sure. Will these books be your favorite? Maybe. Maybe not. How much time have you dedicated to reading? If it took you 6 months to get through Swan's Way while working a full-time job, what else have you read? It better be your favorite book. With all respect to your wizened literary elders, it's more important, I'd say, to listen to yourself and what attracts you, book-wise. Following your own instinctual obsessions will likely put you on the scent, like a bloodhound, of what you'll most respond to. But, and this is a large caveat, it is entirely possible that what you'll most respond to will be mediocrity. For this reason, it may do you well to gauge whether or not you have an authentic preference for what you're reading, or if it's just a phase, if it's just novel or shallow or trendy. Try to determine whether or not there's any actual substance. Does it challenge you? Does it reward you when you try to decipher its complex messages? Did it change you? Did it elicit a strong physical reaction in you? Did it make you frightened? Did it make you very sad? Did it make you overjoyed? Or did you identify immensely with the protagonist or something in there? Or did you recognize truths from your own life that you'd never been able to articulate before in the words on the page? Or did it arouse you in some way? I won't ask you which. But as long as you are intellectually and emotionally engaged, you can feel when there's substance, right? You can feel when there's a profound truth being reflected at you. And you know, as well as I do, that is not all books, right? And I think you know intuitively when you're being led on and it's kind of hollow. It's sort of like the author is trying to convince you of something and you're just not buying it. You know, I think you can tell. Maybe not at first, you know, but eventually, you know, you read enough books, you can tell. Returning to our point though, this is a double-edged sword, of course, you know, because, you know, it's not just wanting to have read as opposed to wanting to read. We do want to have read and have there be a finite end for these books, right? You know, of course, reading for reading's sake ultimately brings nothing but the enjoyment of being transported into one's imagination, into one's thoughts via the written words of another. Now, is the point to just read anything forever? No, of course not. That's absolutely stupid. There's an end, you know, a point, a finishing, and ideally practical utility in what you've read, even if just philosophical or experiential, you know. Otherwise, the endeavor was just entertainment. It was the book version of your phone, right? Which, let's face it, that's a lot of books out there. So what I'm saying is, be careful. But the point, you know, ultimately, as far as I can tell, is to ultimately have finished the book, to interpret it, to have assimilated its ideas for better or worse, and to use this knowledge, wisdom, or insight to one's advantage. You know, it's a dialogue. It's a conversation. The most distilled, coherent parts of somebody's thoughts, the best they can do. Reading is getting the absolute best of a person, right? Out of an author. It is the best that they could give you at that time. And there's always a purpose for this. But the point, as far as I can tell, ultimately, is to have finished the book. To interpret it, to have assimilated its ideas for better or worse, and to use this knowledge, wisdom, or insight to one's own advantage, whether creative or pragmatic. Number 4, not using supplementary material. There's no possible way we're going to get everything a book has to offer in the first read. And often if it's a book worth our time, there's a guaranteed level of difficulty to the text. Whether because it's very erudite or intellectual, or from another era or culture, or all of the above. For this reason, it's essential to get some background on the text. Perhaps a summary of chapters as you go along, just to make sure you got everything. We need some critical insight to the text, right? We can't be experts on the subject of every book we approach, nor should we be expected to be. That's why we're reading these books. Take Shakespeare, for instance. Norton critical editions are great for him. Tons of notes and essays and all kinds of stuff. Paid link below. Norton critical editions are a great way to ameliorate this issue. And this can even be something like ChatGPT, you know? Or some sort of generative AI program. I found it to be extremely useful for summarizations of complex information. If you're reading the Old Testament, you're lost in the narrative of the Israelites, you can just type in, please summarize Numbers chapter 10 out of the Old Testament, and you get a pretty decent description of important events. Now that's just, summary stuff for following a narrative. For critical insight, there's all sorts of things you can do. Again, Norton critical editions are great. Any kind of like Spark Notes or stuff like that, various articles, commentary written by other authors on certain texts, essays written by other well-known authors on the book you're reading. The more famous the book, the more there's going to be written on it. So if you're reading Hamlet or Moby Dick or Crime and Punishment, you're going to have tons of things written on that text. You can take your pick. But and you don't have to read everything, but I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't at least read a few things that have been written about the book that you're reading. Especially if it's particularly dense or challenging or important, in the historical literary canon, as it were, or something of that nature. If Harold Bloom has written something on it, I highly suggest you read it. If Susan Sontag has written something on it, I highly suggest you read it. And so on. People have interesting things to say. I will say though, the caveat to this it could be really hard to read some of this supplementary material while or before you've read the novel and not have spoilers or have certain points of view infect your reading of the text. It's an issue. It's real because it's like the introductions to books these days too, I've noticed, are just like trailers for films. They tell you the whole story, the whole fucking story, but there are no surprises anymore, and that is so frustrating. That is such a buzzkill, and I'm guilty of this too with some reviews. Sometimes it's difficult to comment on a text or a piece of work without giving away the major plot points. But I know that, and I'm right there with you sometimes. But I'm on both sides, so I have that challenge of trying not to spoil too much, and trying to gauge what is too much to reveal in a review. But I'm part of the audience too. I love to be surprised, and when I don't get that, when it's this dead on arrival, it's very, very frustrating. And I haven't figured out a good way to gauge whether or not I should read an introduction to a book first or whether I should wait until afterwards. And so I've basically, at this point, I think I've just stopped reading the introductions. And I come back to it at the end of the book after I've read everything, because it's so awful to just have a major plot point spoiled within the introduction that you're just like, oh God, what the fuck, man? So perhaps, you kind of got to gauge this a little bit and sort of like see, I know it's hard, but it's like how much the commentary is going to reveal or how much you suspect it's going to reveal about the book. Because if it's a very dense commentary, even if it's really good, you're probably going to have all the plot points, the major plot points, spoiled. So you might want to read it afterwards. So read the book first, get what you can out of it, then come back and read supplementary material. Again, this is why maybe I should just make like a ChatGPT video, because I do like it. This is why I like ChatGPT, because you can narrow the focus. You can narrow the scope of focus. And you can just say, summarize the first chapter of Ulysses by James Joyce. And we're trying to find a balance of keeping the surprises and getting the most out of the text that we can upon first read. And you can do that by narrowing the focus. So, food for thought. None of these AI systems are perfect or substitutes for commentary or lectures by experts on certain texts, but it's a quick and dirty way for you to keep moving forward if you're lost or you're stuck or you're low on sleep or something like that, you know what I mean? And then you can continue on your merry way. Number 3, not accepting and pushing through the occasional boredom that comes with reading. I know. I was just saying that we should enjoy this whole process, right? We should want to read. And I know we all do, right? But you'll be bored sometimes while reading. It happens. It happens to all of us. Just because you're bored does not mean the text is bad. If you're bored the entire way, that might be a red flag. But it's an ebb and flow, It's a conversation you're having. You're interpreting stuff. Sometimes you're locked in, other times you're miles away. It's all right. Couldn't tell you why. Something to do with the human brain, it seems. I'm sure there are people out there who are like dialed in the entire time while reading, Paradise Lost, and amazing. That's great. I haven't read it in forever, but whenever Michael came on the scene, I was just like, and that's all right. Just continue, come back if necessary, and all will be well. What's fascinating is that boredom is actually something miraculous, I think. Boredom is the creative mind at work. Something turns on and things feel boring. But this is when the mind feels pressure to creatively work. The pain of boredom seems to be like the pain of weights bearing down on the muscle, forcing it to grow stronger and develop, like strength training. Isn't that interesting? Realizing you're bored can, ironically, be exciting, because you realize your mind is on the search for something. It's inquisitive. It kind of casts the state of being in a whole new light. Boredom now, these days, with TikTok and Instagram, is almost a luxury. The silence of hypnotic, introspective boredom very well may be a cherished state of existence for generations to come. For it will be the true space of active creative production instead of passive consumption. You get my drift? Don't get it twisted though. As you are probably already thinking, there are of course different kinds of boredom. Two I can immediately think of. Boredom because what you're reading is too complex for your level, either plot-wise or just generally, like it's intentionally difficult. Maybe something like Faulkner with all his different narrative voices and the sound and the fury, or Gravity's Rainbow with everything. Take the time to figure it out to re-engage your mind. The other boredom comes from engaging in material that is so predictable or facile or mediocre that you're just left intellectually dehydrated. In this case, feel free to abandon the book for something more appealing, up to your level. However, make sure you're not just book hopping. This is a fabulous way to never finish anything of length and substance, trust me. Given my job, I am often forced between getting the content out or finishing a book. I'm always reading multiple books at one time, so while I return to books to finish them, after taking time to shoot videos for other books and that I've finished and review them and edit them and post them and so on, it can be difficult to pick something back up after 3 weeks of reading and finishing other books. This doesn't mean that you can't read multiple books at the same time. Perish the thought, the temptation is too strong. And as Oscar Wilde said, I can resist anything except temptation. Thus, I say keep it to 3. A marriage, a mistress, or paramour if you're female, lover perhaps would be the appropriate word, and a light fling novella or poetry or something, nothing too serious. Gotta keep them at bay. This should be perfectly manageable with a 9 to 5 and your readings won't grow too stale. A caveat, might I suggest you never try this in your relationships and always remain faithful if that's your commitment. Polyamory never works in a long-term sustainable fashion. It's like trying to read 6 different profound classics at the same time and trying to keep your head on straight. It doesn't work. It's going to be completely superficial and you're just never going to get anywhere. You're just going to be depressed. So yeah, book hopping will slow you down. It'll slow you down like a motherfucker. If you don't care, whatever. If you just want to leisurely go and you're just like, oh, I could take 3 years to read, War and Peace or whatever. By all means, totally fine. As long as you're not concerned about the fact that we are all going to die. Which brings me to number 1. You have not made a to be read before death list. I have this wooden calendar in front of my desk. I look at it every day. It has the decades in increments of 10 on the left here, and the number of weeks in the year here. And I have filled in all of these dots, and this is where we're at right here. Close to my 35th birthday. And every single dot on here represents a week of my life. And the whole calendar goes to 90, no more. Extra credit down here. And every Sunday I take my Sharpie and I fill in a dot. It's a fine way to remember the time I have left. There's a little pain every Sunday as I take my Sharpie and fill in another circle and asking myself why the hell I didn't do more of whatever that week, usually reading or writing. But what will really tie all the previous things in this video together, and would be a preferable substitute for this calendar, is a to be read before death list. I've seen videos on YouTube of, X amount of books I want to read before I die. That's great. Good for you. Your list is not going to be mine. You make yours. That's the important thing I want you to take away from this video. You make yours. Yours is important to you. Mine isn't important to you. It's not an original idea, but it's a powerful one. Before writing the script for this video, I hadn't made a to be read before death list. And frankly, with the calendar and the stuff I read about, I'm shocked. Of all the basic bitch book reviewer things, right? It had never occurred to me for some reason. Now there's a catch with mine though. There's a catch with my recommendation to you. You could list out every book under the sun, sure. I want to read Anatomy of Melancholy and The Recognitions and Infinite Jest and Oh Lost and The Tunnel and the longest shit I could possibly think of. All of In Search of Lost Time in a year. You could list out every book under the sun, sure. You could go through your Goodreads and that's your to be read before death list. No. Let's actually accomplish something here. Let's put some pressure on you. Let's narrow the scope. Let's make this something you can finish, and something that will produce change inside you. Force it. Something with pressure. Let's make it 10 books. Only 10. To be revised naturally down the road, of course, but only after you finish the 10 can you revise the list. And I'll bet you'd be amazed how long it'll take you to read those 10 books that you want to read before you die. And that won't even fill up one level of your shelf here on one of your bookshelves. 10 books. You can actually dedicate a shelf to it. Perhaps I'll do that. I'm going to do that, as a matter of fact. I'm going to dedicate a shelf to my to be read before death books. Yeah, I'm sure you and I will be amazed how long it will take us to read those 10 books. And really read them, really get the most out of them. Because that's what it's all about, really. That's why we're reading. We're reading to get this information, these experiences. We should get serious. And that is the most serious thing I can possibly think of. That is the most serious personal reading challenge. A lot of us probably won't even do it. We probably won't even make it through the 10 books we want to read before we die. The 10 most important. Because they're going to be, it's not going to be easy stuff. It's going to be big. So let's do it. Let's do it. So I'm going to reveal my 10 for patrons. So if you want to check those out, please subscribe to my Patreon below. But mine are not important, That's not the point. It's cool if you pick and choose from mine and it inspires you. That's great. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is to know where you're going, to know where you want to go, and to go there. And you're revealing something very interesting about yourself when you create this list, which you should keep for the rest of your life, if you can. Because you're revealing where you're coming from, but you're also revealing, if you follow it through, where you're going, It's interesting. Your choices say something about where you've been and about where you're going. And where you are, of course. I'm talking about something you keep with you until the day you die. Since, as a reader, if you're anything like me, I imagine, you're in this for life. If it's got you, there's no curing it. You'll be reading and reading until you can't read and then some. Have a vision of where you're going and where you want to be as a reader. What do you want to know about? Right? Which authors do you really want to know about? Pick 10 of them. So there are no rules, of course, but it's just my suggestion that you write these choices down on a piece of paper, physically, on a physical piece of paper, and keep it. So you can feel that satisfaction of crossing out the book that has eluded you in your life until now. And the separate revisions to follow throughout your life. But you have to finish those first 10 before you can revise and come up with a new list. With each crossing out comes new knowledge and new experience, new life, more life. It'll be a tool wherein you measure your own narrative, a barometer of existence, an appraisal of your journey, as a reader and thus as a reading person, as a man or a woman who seeks, who wants more experiences of consciousness. Because while we say we just do this as a hobby or for fun or as education or whatever, let's not kid ourselves. We're here because we're trying to find answers of a kind, though it's not that straightforward or as cheap as that phrase is. We're here to unlock something in ourselves, to discover new territory as though we're crossing an ocean to foreign shores. Thus, this list becomes a piece of your biographical history, and a map, both signifying where you were in your life as you wrote it, what you're interested in at this certain place and time, and also where you're going. And if you keep it, you're able to guide your own existence. One more unit of control in an increasingly unstable world. For me, that has a lot of appeal. This all probably sounds pretentious right now, because it's not that important, unless you want it to be. It's as serious as you want to take it, right? Or not. Maybe it's just for fun. Or maybe it's one of the most important things you'll ever do in your life. Because whether we like it or not, what you read defines who you are. So be careful where you put your time, Because where you put your time and where you decide to use your extremely sophisticated organic piece of technology called your brain, what you decide to interpret with it, decipher, what you decide to understand with it, changes you. So with that, coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for stopping by and watching. I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show. I place their names in this mason jar, and for every review, I pull out a name And whoever's name I pull out is sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, normally. No book today, but yeah. Normally is sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And the coffee is amazing. It's from Nicaragua. It's what I was drinking right here. And it is gone. If you would like to get in and help support the show, I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much. You can click on the link below or go to patreon.com/books are better than food and donate whatever you can afford. The tiers start at $5 per video, and I sincerely appreciate it. You'll also get access to the Patron-Only Reviews. I just posted this the other day, and this is one of the greatest biographies I've ever read. All these reviews ad-free, plus the Discord channel, and the Better Than Friday newsletter, which I send out every Friday, which is just a list of 5 different things I'm interested in at any given time. Could be books in the pipeline, music, articles, changes week to week. Thank you very much to all my patrons, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. And whoever wins this one, you can choose the first book on your to be read before death list. Whatever that may be. Maybe it's one I've reviewed, maybe not. Just let me know and I'll send it your way. Cool. Mark N. Thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive whichever book you prefer, plus a bag of delicious coffee, roasted by yours truly. And I hope you love both. Cheers. Please subscribe if you have not already and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and always remember, die reading. All right. Great to see you as always. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.